Hello everybody, and welcome to the fifth part of What If Naruto Was Neglected by His Family and Trained by Tobirama. I hope you enjoy this What If. Also, if you want part 6, comment, like and subscribe to the channel. Time skip 1 year later. Konoha Ninja Academy. Alright class, and today we will start about the history of how the village hidden in the leaves was founded by our two main founders of the village. The Chunin instructor of the academy, Irika Yumino, trailed off slightly when he gazed at one of the back benches of his class and his eye twitched. In one of the last benches beside the open window, enjoying the soft and cold breeze brushing past the window, a mop of blonde hair was sprawled across the desk, softly snoring away in silence and calmness. Beside him, a lavender-eyed girl was glancing at her bench partner nervously, seeing her instructor throwing a hateful glare at the peacefully sleeping blonde. She put her hand on his shoulder and let out a silent whisper out of everyone's earshot. "Naruto-kun," she whispered in her soft and angelic voice, making the sleeping boy smile softly in his sleep. 5 more minutes." He moaned softly and put his head in between his crossed arms happily while dozing off again. Irika's eye twitched dangerously when he saw the blonde sleeping as if it was his own bedroom. And this wasn't his first time either. Apparently it had become a routine of sorts. But Irika could never reprimand the blonde for anything, since when he asked him questions about the lecture that he slept out, he would get answers that would go well beyond the normal scope of the topic. The instructor couldn't help but admire the boy's intelligence. But there were some major flaws too with his student. For example, that laziness that the blonde had reserved tons of somewhere within him. "Naruto Namikaze, wake up," he shouted with a twitching eye, making Naruto's face scrunch up and his head lift off his desk/pillow for the time being. He rubbed his eyes sleepily and let out a soft yawn, making the teacher's annoyance touch new heights. "Will you keep it down? People are trying to sleep here," he said within his yawn, and kept his head down again to continue his slumber. The class broke out in a fit of laughter. Even Hinata was giggling softly in her hand. Irika gained a tick mark on his forehead and growled. "I said wake up, damn it," he shouted using his patented big head no jutsu, making Naruto look at him in annoyance and wake up. His sleep now broke. He looked at his fuming instructor, who was fuming like an angry bull, and blinked innocently as if he had somehow invented the concept of man's first fire within his head. Irika blinked back, seeing his student's face of innocent realization when Naruto stood up, much to his surprise. "Oh Kami, I slept in," he whispered to himself, making Irika smile in relief. At least the blonde was starting to realize. His praise for the blonde within his head stopped when the voice of the window sliding open reached his ears, and he saw the blonde with one knee and hand over the window, just about to jump out. His eyes widened when he saw Naruto waving his hand to him lazily and smiling. "I'll see you around, Irika-sensei." He trailed off, making the instructor shell-shocked, and turned to the wide lavender-eyed girl who was looking at him like he was an alien of sorts. "I'll borrow your notes later on, Hina-chan, all right?" he asked softly, making her nod with her cheeks turning pink from his affectionate tone with which he spoke to her and the nickname he always called her with, and nodded meekly while gazing at her lap shyly. "Jana," he said lazily, and jumped out, much to the shock of Irika, who broke out of his stupor and ran up to the window hurriedly to see the blonde jumping over the fence and running off into the village streets. "Naruto, come back here," was the shout heard across half the village, courtesy of an irate Chunin instructor watching his student run off in the middle of class while his whole class laughed at his expense. The instructor sighed tiredly but couldn't help the small smile that lit up his face at the boy's antics. He always kept him on his toes, he mused when he caught the collars of 3 boys and smiled at them sweetly. "And just where do you think you are going, Kiba, Choji, and Shikamaru?" he asked innocently, making them gulp and laugh nervously. "Well, you see, Irika-sensei," the chubby boy said in a nervous laugh, and the class watched their sensei start his reprimand over the 3 about the importance of history classes and the like. Senju compounds. Naruto walked into the Senju compounds with his usual lazy smile and his hands in his pockets. He came to the door and gave it a knock to have his white-haired master open the door and raise an eyebrow at seeing the blonde standing there. "Aren't you supposed to be at the academy?" he asked, and got a nod with a lazy smile back and stood silently, awaiting for an explanation for which he already had an idea of what was to come. "Yeah, the lectures were too boring, something about the foundations of our village and stuff, I already know that. Plus, I slept half the time, so might as well use the rest to train, you know," he asked, making the senju sigh tiredly. The boy did this quite often. He knew it was wrong, but he couldn't deny the blonde's words. If he already had knowledge of the subject being taught, then he couldn't hope to have the boy paying rapt attention to it with the blonde's ever-present laziness there. You still shouldn't skip out on lectures, Naruto. He reprimanded half-heartedly and sighed again when the blonde waved his hand dismissively and stepped in the house without a care for his words. He walked in behind his pupil and took to the training grounds right behind him as the both face each other in the middle of the clearing. All right then, let's perfect the jutsu we have been working over till now and continue on where we left off, he said, getting a nod from the boy. He took out a scroll from his pocket and pumped some chakra into it to summon a basket full of rubber balls. Naruto groaned inwardly, seeing those accursed things there that hurt like hell, and watched Tobirama pick up a handful of them in each of his hands and look at him like a predator who was about to ravage his prey. All right, you know the rules. Dodge as many as you can by using only the jutsu I have had you working on and nothing else, he said, gaining another nod from the boy. He started launching his barrage of rubber balls straight at the boy and smirked when he watched the boy disappear in a poof of smoke just as the boy was about to be pelted with the balls and was replaced with a log instead. The boy is improving quite a bit, he mused, and launched another barrage at the new location the boy had arrived at almost instantly. He watched on proudly as yet another perfect seal-less kawarimi was executed and turned his eyes to the left to throw his third set of rubber balls. These ones were really quick and Naruto wasn't able to focus his chakra quick enough, resulting in his chest getting pelted by the rubber balls harshly and slid back from the force in a harsh cough. Kami, does he hit hard? Thought the blonde, glaring at his master, who looked on at his pupil stoically and readied for his next attack. He stood up straight and pulled off another seal-less replacement just as the barrage was about to make contact. Yes, that's it, don't lose your focus, Naruto, shouted Tobirama, unleashing another attack at his student, who performed yet another perfect replacement much to his happiness. 3 hours later we find an 8-year-old blonde boy sprawled on the ground like a bedsheet with deep heavy breaths, looking at the sky with half-lidded eyes. His whole body ached with being pelted with sometimes with those rubber balls and didn't have an ounce of energy left to even move. Naruto, he heard his master call out to him and sat up with a groan to see him motioning for him to come near him. He stood up with a wince at his aching muscles and made his way to the man, who smiled when his student was standing in front of him and put his hand over his head and ruffled his hair with a proud smile. I'm proud of you, Naruto, you did well past what I expected from you, he said in a warm tone, making Naruto flush in embarrassment yet smile a bit nervously and rub the back of his neck, not really knowing what to say. Yeah, thanks, old man. I tried my best, he said a bit nervously, making Tobirama smile. The boy never really went over the top and became a bit nervous when praised, trying to brush it off. It was a nervous tic that he had gotten used to over the past few years with him, and it made him happy that the boy took nothing for granted. So why have you been pushing so hard for this jutsu, old man? I mean, you had me master the solid henge first and then the kawarimi to do them without seals. I mean, no one really puts that much effort into them, after all they are only E-rank ninjutsu. He was cut off by the narrowed eyes of his master, who answered his query in his usual stoic voice. These are the basics upon which you would go on through your whole life, Naruto. These two jutsus, if used perfectly, save your life more times than any other technique I know of in the shinobi arts. Why people never master it to the fullest is beyond me, but I won't have my student die because he wasn't able to pull off a perfect replacement in time and die in the battlefield for the lack of training in an E-rank jutsu like kawarimi, he explained calmly, and Naruto nodded with a look of admiration for the man. He never settled for anything less than perfection and had told him he won't teach him any other technique until he had mastered these two first. But why not the clone jutsu, old man? He asked in innocent curiosity and grew confused at the frown that marked his master's face. Because it is utterly useless, he stated bluntly, making Naruto's eyes widen in shock. It was one of the basic 3 ninjutsu required to pass the academy after all. But why is that, old man? He asked, now completely confused, since never had he heard the man render a technique as dismissively as he had heard just now. He would get the same answer every time he asked him a question about his doubts on a technique. Never underestimate any technique, for in the heat of battle the most useless and unpredictable of all techniques sometimes turn the tide of battle completely. He recited the words Tobirama had spoken to him in his head word for word and looked at the man whose frown hadn't left his face and had instead turned into a full-blown scowl of disgust. I made the cloning technique a necessary requirement to pass the academy, since it was one of the 3 basic techniques I knew a shinobi uses for his complete lifetime, he said, getting a nod from Naruto. But what I meant were solid clones. Those clones they teach you at the academy are mere illusions. Any shinobi worth his merit can decipher a clone for a real user in a mere glance, rendering it completely useless. The standards of the academy have fallen to a new level of low if one could graduate by learning such a pathetic skill, he said in disgust, making Naruto nod. He had learned all about the different types of clones when he was learning about the various elemental natures, and there were solid clones of every element, with some of them even being non-elemental. Besides, you won't be able to do the clone jutsu if you had to bet your life on it. Your chakra is much too dense and powerful to execute a technique requiring such minuscule amounts of chakra, even with the amount of chakra control I have drilled into your head, he said in his calm voice, making Naruto quite surprised and shocked at the same time. Then how am I going to graduate the academy, old man? It is a necessary requirement to pass it after all, he said in a worried voice, but stopped, seeing the smirk on his master's face. I have a different type of clone technique I made myself that I'll teach you soon enough, don't worry. The extra credits at the examinations will make you pass with even higher scores than you would if you executed the normal one perfectly, he said with a smile, making Naruto grin foxily and nod in happy mood. His eyes narrowed when his senses tingled, making Tobirama smile at how far his sensing abilities were progressing as well ever since he had taught him the water walking exercise, which he had yet to master completely, but he was close to mastering it now. He saw Naruto's narrowed eyes widen before he grinned happily and ran by his side to the figure that appeared behind him in a blonde blur. Shursue, he chirped happily and barreled into the Uchiha's chest, who caught the excited blonde with a chuckle. How are you doing, my chibi blonde? He asked with a grin, making Naruto pout cutely and cross his arms with a huff. Don't call me that, he said, puffing his cheeks, and grumbled when the raven-haired boy just ruffled his silky hair with a slight laugh. Yeah, you're still chibi to me, Gaki, he said, making Naruto even more angry before he continued by bringing his lips closer to his ear, making Naruto listen on curiously. So how is the technique I taught you coming along? He asked in a slight whisper out of Tobirama's earshot, and grinned when he saw the blonde grin foxily. It's going great. I'm almost there, Shursue, he said happily, making the Uchiha nod and smile proudly. He took out a small scroll and handed it to Naruto, who took it with an excited look in his eyes when he saw the Uchiha symbol that the scroll donned. Then start on this when you are done mastering the previous one, all right? I'll teach you if you have any doubts. Just come over to me, he said, and Naruto threw his arms around the crouching Uchiha's neck, who hugged the boy he had come to see as his little brother over the past year with a chuckle. Tobirama smiled as he walked to the two happily chatting boys and coughed slightly to make their attention turn to them. He smiled in amusement when he saw the two of them turn sheepish and rub their necks in almost complete sync. So what brings you by today, Shursue? He asked stoically, making the boy bow to the man in respect. We should talk in private, Tobirama-sama, he said in a serious voice, making Tobirama nod and look at his pupil, who just smiled lazily while walking out of the clearing with a wave of his hand. Yeah, I'll head home too, old man. See you tomorrow, he said while putting his hands in his pockets, and Tobirama took the Uchiha to his living room and sat on his couch to see the Uchiha really serious about something. Tobirama-sama, I need your advice, he said, confusing the Senju completely, though heard him out patiently. The things I'm about to say are only known to the Sandaime and the 3 elders of the village for now, along with my friend Itachi. But I needed a person who would be able to give me something to make the impending situation on the village stop from what is about to happen, he said, making Tobirama's eyes harden and nod at the mention of the village and how secretive the matter was. He instantly stood up and went through hand seals, slamming his palm on the ground when kanji covered it and the room was sealed for privacy as he retook his seat. Tell me about it and I'll do my best to help, he said stoically, and got a nod along with a deep breath from the Uchiha. He saw the boy as his own nephew, since his father Kagami had been his student and subordinate during his younger days before the man sacrificed his life in the Third Great Shinobi War. He had known the boy since he was a little child, and the boy always came to him when he had a matter that he could see no way out of. The Uchiha clan is planning a revolt against the village, he stated bluntly, making Tobirama's eyes widen in horror. A moment later they narrowed in anger, which he kept in complete check, already expecting them to do something so stupid. Since when? He asked emotionlessly, making Shursue look down in anguish. A year now, he said sadly, making Tobirama quite shocked. How long has Hiruzen known about this? He asked emotionlessly, yet again making the onyx black eyes of the Uchiha Anbu to meet his. 8 months, he stated seriously, shocking Tobirama to the core. Then why hasn't he done something about it already? Has that monkey finally gone senile? He asked, losing his temper a bit at seeing the situation so dire, and Shursue nodded. He tried to talk them out of it peacefully, but all attempts have failed until now, he said, making a growl die down in the Senju's throat. What kind of a failure student did I nominate as my successor then? To think he isn't able to keep the village's founder clans unified and defuse the situation in such a long time already knowing about it, he thought angrily and watched the Uchiha with softened eyes when he saw how tired the boy looked. How long until they make a move then? He asked the question most important at the time, and Shursui looked down in shame. In 2 weeks' time, just a couple of days before the Kyubi festival when the village is busy preparing for it, he said in agony, making the Senju fall silent and run hundreds of scenarios within his head with his eyes closed. He rubbed his forehead when he saw only one outcome coming on top each time and knew that his student won't have the power to really pull off the decision if it was made by the council elders. You have a plan then, he stated more than asked, and watched the Uchiha smile sadly and in admiration before giving him a nod. Yes, I have talked to the Sandaime about this too. There is a way with which I could defuse the situation completely for the time being, he said, making Tobirama raise an eyebrow. His eyes widened when he saw the boy's eyes turn scarlet into a 3-tomo Sharingan before the tomo spun, shrunk and joined to form a 4-pin shuriken. The Manjikyu Sharingan. He whispered in realization, making Shursui quite shocked that he knew about the most forbidden of secrets of his clan, but he couldn't expect any less of the man. Yes, Tobirama-sama, I have a genjutsu, the Koto Amatsukami. It allows me to plant new ideas into someone's head so subtly that I can almost create false memories and experiences for the victims to make them believe anything I want. I will launch the genjutsu tomorrow on the clan elders and heads to make them stop the revolt and planned coup d'etat. It is the strongest Manjikyu Sharingan genjutsu in existence, he said, making Tobirama stunned. He always knew the boy was a prodigy in the illusion arts, but to think he was capable of such feats that not even Madara himself was able to do in his prime. He really was a genius when it came to the art. But why are you telling me this, child? I don't see where you need my advice, he asked in confusion to meet Shursui's pained eyes. Am I doing the right thing, Tobirama-sama? I am manipulating them, their thoughts, their hearts. They are my clan, isn't it out of boundaries? His babbling was cut short by Tobirama's calm reply. If you do not pull through with it, there will be a civil war in the village if Hiruzen isn't able to defuse the situation first, which he should have until now. Many people will die on both sides, and the internal strife will bring in wolves from the outside who will no doubt take advantage of the situation. It would be the trigger required for the Fourth Shinobi World War as we know it, he stated, making Shursui fall silent at his wise and experienced words and listened on like a little child to the man's words. The children of your clan and your village will be caught in the strife between the two factions. Many of them killed, the others being orphaned. Are you willing to take that on your conscience? He asked calmly, making Shursui's eyes widen in horror as he realized the truth behind his words. Is it a greater burden than the subtle manipulation of some of your clan members bent to make the situation rise up to it, to make sure the peace in the village is maintained? Ask yourself that and come to a decision on your own. For it is only you who will make the decision, me or any other can show you a path, but it you who must follow it to the end, child, he said warmly, making Shursui tear up slightly before he wiped his eyes and nodded. He stood up with a new fire and determination in his eyes with a smirk. I have made my decision, Tobirama-sama. All my doubts have been answered, thank you. I knew you were the right person to come to, he said while walking out and putting his crow mask on. Tobirama, however, smiled sadly as he watched the boy walk out of his house. You should have come to me a lot earlier, child. Then maybe I could have devised a way to avoid this situation altogether, he whispered to himself while shaking his head sadly and walked into his room to get some sleep as the old age weighed down on his shoulders. Uzumaki Namike's households. Kushina had served up dinner to the two of her children since they had been hungry after their day's ninjutsu practice in the academy earlier, and took a seat with the twins on the dining table. So how did the day at the academy go? She asked curiously, making both of them to stop eating and look at their mother. A moment later Mito grinned happily. It was great, Ka-san. Irika-sensei taught us the henge. Me and Menma nearly finished it too, you know, she chirped happily, making Kushina smile and put her chin over her locked fingers happily at seeing her bubbly girl so happy. Kushina had served up dinner to the two of her He flunked out in between our lecture again, Ka-san. Irika-sensei couldn't catch him after he left by leaping through the window so quickly. Made us miss a few minutes of our lecture from the disruption he caused in the class, he stated calmly, making Kushina frown at his words. She saw Mito glare heatedly at the red-haired boy and spoke up. Is it true, Mito? She asked calmly, making Mito sadden a bit and nod silently. Kushina heard the door being opened and a battered and tired Naruto walked in with quite roughed up clothes, showing her how hard he must have trained today. Naruto, she called out, making the boy look at her curiously, and saw her walk up to him and stand in front of him with a stern look on her face while holding her hands on her hips. Did you flunk out of the class in between the lecture today? She asked calmly and was surprised when he nodded innocently. Hi, he said in his soft tone, making her look at him curiously. She had half expected him to deny or lie altogether, but this was surprising. The twins watched on intently at how he handled Kushina. Why? She asked in a firm tone, which Naruto didn't notice due to how tired and beat up he felt at the moment. I knew all that Irika-sensei was saying before he even began. It was so boring I slept off in between his lecture, and when he woke me up I decided not to waste my time there anymore and went to the old man's for some training, he said, surprising her by his honest words quite a bit along with the twins. Menma though clutched the chopsticks in his hand hardly when he saw his brother rise up on his toes and plant a kiss on his mother's cheek, making her smile fondly, and her anger died down when she saw him yawn tiredly. I'm beat, Ka-chan, the old man pushed me a lot today. I'll go and sleep now, all right? You can give me the lecture tomorrow when I'm fresh and ready to listen and will most probably not fall asleep, he said, picking an apple up and walking up the stairs to his room, leaving a fondly smiling Kushina who just sighed tiredly and rubbed her temples. That boy I will never understand, she said to herself tiredly, making Mito giggle at how her Aniki would always get off without even a small lecture with his little tricks. Menma focused on his food entirely, though wasn't feeling particularly hungry now, and retired to his room himself. 2 days later. Senju compounds. Tobirama sat on the porch of his garden, enjoying the early sun rays of the morning like he always did. But something just didn't feel right today. There was a feeling of foreboding and something vile in the air that just irked him to the core. Something bad was about to happen and he could feel it now. He was on his guard when he felt an incoming presence and flicked out his kunai, but loosened his grip when he saw the heir to the Uchiha clan standing in front of him. Though when he saw him closely he was horrified at the amounts of blood the boy was covered with and rushed to him immediately. He stopped when the boy just raised his hand and spoke up. It isn't my blood, Tobirama-sama, he said stoically in a dead voice, making Tobirama a bit confused before his eyes widened in horror when he saw the guilt and regret in the boy's eyes. No, he whispered, making the Uchiha smile sadly and nod. Yes, your assumptions are correct as always, Naidame-sama. I was ordered by the Sandaime and the village elders to stop the revolt rising within our clan after it looked unavoidable with the last available plan failing, he said, making Tobirama's heart drop. He clenched his eyes shut and couldn't help the lone tear that escaped his left eye as he clutched his crossed arms tightly. Though then he registered what the boy had said. What do you mean the last available plan failed? Why didn't Shursue do what he planned all along? He asked, making another sad smile mar the Uchiha's face. So I see he told you everything like I thought. It wasn't like he didn't do it, Naidame, he couldn't do it, he said stoically, making Tobirama scowl at his words. Why? He asked, barely maintaining his composure now. Because someone killed him before he could execute his plan, he said, making Tobirama's eyes widen in shock yet again. But who would? As if hearing his question, Itachi answered. It was Danzo, he said, making Tobirama's blood boil and his killing intent to be let loose around him, which didn't affect Itachi in the slightest. He thought that it was only a temporary solution and that our clan needed to be gotten rid of for the village to prosper. He tried to take Shursue's eyes for his own and even managed to get one, he said, making Tobirama clench his knuckles and jaw tightly. His failures of students were doing everything in the book to make him feel all the more disgusted with them, he thought angrily. And what about the other one? He asked calmly, masking his emotion perfectly when he saw Itachi take out a vial with a green preservation fluid and lone Sharingan eye floating in it. Itachi walked up to Tobirama and put eye in front of eye, which Tobirama took without a word, knowing who it belonged to already, and a choke was held back in his throat barely. It was Shursue's last wish for me to deliver it to you personally, Naidame-sama. He said you would know how to use its power best and not let it fall into the wrong hands. He said you would understand, said the stoic Uchiha, getting a nod from Tobirama when Itachi dispersed in a flock of ravens, and Tobirama instantly sealed the vial up in his wrist in a personal blood and chakra restricted seal. He walked out of his house with the aura of power radiating all around him. Everywhere people moved out of the intimidating man's path who was walking like a god among men. Hokage Tower. Tobirama walked up the steps of the tower, and with each step each persona around him took a step away. When he reached the desk to the Hokage office, and the receptionist stood up and bowed in respect at seeing the man walking towards her. "Naidame-sama. Wait, you don't have an appointment." She trailed off when the man walked right past her as if she wasn't even there, and saw two ANBU guarding the doorstep in front of his path to block entry to the office which once belonged to him. "I'm sorry, Naidame-sama, but you do not." The ANBU wasn't able to finish since Tobirama had both of them in a chokehold while they held his strong arms like frightened girls. He slammed their faces together, knocking them out cold in a flick of a second, and kicked the door with a chakra-enhanced kick. The door flew right of its hinges and many feet away, with the two rag doll ANBUs following in close behind it. "Who the hell? Sensei." "Ugh." Hiruzen started but stopped at seeing his sensei before he was in a chokehold himself in a second. He slammed his face on his desk, making Hiruzen's nose break, and a torrent of blood flew out. Tobirama threw the man towards the wall containing the portraits of the Hokage, and Hiruzen slammed right into it with a loud bang. Tobirama was instantly surrounded by 3 teams of ANBU who were pointing shaky swords at his fatal organs while he glowed in the power his chakra was radiating and didn't even look up from his downed student. "Everybody stand down," came the muffled voice of Hiruzen, who stood up, fighting off the dizziness in his head, and saw the ANBU still on guard, making him turn furious. "I said stand down now," he roared, making them shiver and stand back when Tobirama made his way to his student calmly. "Sensei, please understand there was no other choice, I had to give the order." Hiruzen tried to explain but was cut short when a voice rang throughout the office. Slap. The earlier blows didn't hurt Hiruzen as much as that simple slap on his cheek did. But even more did it pain him to see the broken and pained eyes of the ever-calm Senju, who had 2 silent tear streams flowing down his cheeks as he watched him in disgust. Hiruzen couldn't even meet the man's eyes, who was looking at him in utter disdain. The whole office was now filled with several Jounin, Chunin, and ANBU along with the officials who worked at the office, as they all watched the commotion silently between the 2 Hokages. Tobirama glanced to the side to see the smiling face of his elder brother in the portrait on the wall. He ran his fingers on the picture with a faraway gaze and closed his eyes in pain. "I'm sorry, Hashirama, I'm glad you are dead before the time you had to see this. I have failed what you dreamed for, brother," he whispered and walked towards the door of the office. Everyone stepped away to make way for him and not come in his way when they saw Hiruzen fall to his knees and punch the ground in agony. "Hokage-sama," an ANBU stuttered out, holding a bandage for his nose when they heard the dead voice of Hiruzen ring through the office. "Leave this office, no meetings today." "I want to stay alone," he whispered, but all of them heard it clear as crystal and quickly emptied the office. "How could I have let this happen?" he growled, slamming another fist in the wall angrily as the news spread like wildfire that the mightiest and oldest of the clans in the elemental nations were now nearly extinct. The Uchiha clan was no more. Kanahagaku no Sato. Next morning. Memorial grounds. Almost the whole village was gathered at the memorial grounds for the combined funeral of the once great Uchiha clan. The village had taken a severe hit in its forces, especially its internal security, since the complete Uchiha police force which took care of all internal affairs had been wiped out too. The whole burden had been thrust over the shoulders of the ANBU Black Ops, thinning out the already far too slimmed upper tier of Konoha's forces even further. All of the shinobi and civilians were paying their respects to the newly built Uchiha headstone in the memorial grounds in honor of the deceased clan members. Tobirama stood with his arms crossed and his stoic mask put up on his face as he watched several people pay their respects and put down the flowers for the deceased. Only 2 were not there, both the last remnants of the almost extinct clan. Sasuke Uchiha, the lone survivor of the massacre, was still in the hospital, still recuperating from the vicious mental attack his brother had unleashed upon him, and was undergoing therapies from the experts of the Yamanaka clan. The second, however, his narrowed stoic eyes softened when he watched a lone mop of blonde hair sitting in front of a grave. Naruto's cerulean baby blue eyes, the ones that always shimmered with innocence and happiness, watched on in sorrow and despair as his small hand traced the name engraved upon the grave among the hundreds sprawled all across the grounds. Shursue Uchiha. He read, and a lone tear rolled down his eye when he read the name of his elder brother in all but blood. He had connected to him much more than anyone other than his mother and Tobirama himself over the past year. Tobirama had, after a long thought, surmised that the only way to truly make Naruto learn the intricacies and the untapped potential his eyes held, had asked the one man among the Uchihas that he had known ever since he was an infant. Kagami Uchiha's son, Shisui Uchiha. The only person other than Kushina and Tobirama who knew of what lurked behind the sealed illusion of those baby blue orbs. Naruto had never felt such a lovely bond before. Sure, Tobirama and he were really close, his mother he loved more than anything in the world along with his siblings, but the bond with Shisui was different. The Genjutsu master always took time out of his tight ANBU schedule to train with Naruto and pulled off several pranks in the village too. They had become a menace around the village. One an ANBU and the other just as skilled in stealth to evade them. Well, truly it was a troublesome duo to say the least. He was much closer to Naruto's age and thus the boy could relate to the 20-year-old ANBU. Their personalities matched too, both were happy-go-lucky and loved to have fun every now and then, though when push came to shove they trained themselves to the ground while donning their infectious stupid grins. Tobirama had helped him master his basics, but his first important jutsu had been taught to him by his brother only recently. "You didn't even see me master it, Shisui," he whispered sadly with teary eyes as he thought back to the day when he had pestered the Uchiha finally to the point that he had relented in and taught him a jutsu. Flashback. "Come on Shisui, please, just one jutsu," whined a blonde boy clutching the waist of the Uchiha, who let out a tired sigh. "Oh shut it, Chibi, you are getting trained by a Hokage whose specialty lies in creating jutsus. Tobirama-sama will teach you." He was cut off when he saw the pleading eyes of the blonde and his will wavered. Those wide blue eyes looked at him so innocently that he would have taught him anything if he stared long enough. "Shisui, the old man has been keeping on about his need for perfecting my basics. I mean, mastering Henge and Kawarimi is fine and all, but I need a real jutsu. And I have worked hard on water walking too, so my control is up to par too. Come on, just one please, Oni-sama," he said softly, making Shisui last defenses crumbled when he gave into the soft melodic voice of the chibi blonde he loved so much. Especially after he had played the Oni-sama card, he couldn't say no. "All right." He trailed off when he saw the blonde pump his fist happily. "Yada," he exclaimed, making the raven sweat drop at being tricked so easily, but smiled fondly when he saw the eager face of the jumping blonde who looked to be too high on sugar and candies. A moment later the blonde blur barreled straight into his chest and he chuckled when he saw the star-filled eyes of the chibi blonde he loved so much. "So, what are you going to teach me?" "Oh, I know, teach me the cool jutsu that makes you disappear and reappear as an afterimage. Old man said you were the best at it, or I know, maybe one of those genjutsus. I swear Irika-sensei won't know what." He was cut off when a hand sat atop his head and stopped his babbling, making him look at the amused onyx orb staring at him while he looked back innocently. "All right, calm down and I won't teach you anything that will make it even harder for the village to catch you after some of your infamous pranks." He chuckled when Naruto slumped in defeat and bobbed his head down lifelessly. "But I will teach you something pretty cool." He trailed off when the blonde's head whipped up and grinned foxily. "Come on, tell me Shisui, please," he said, making him smile and nod. He pulled the blonde in a hug and used his famous smokeless shunshin to disappear with the blonde to another part of the training fields in the village. Naruto looked around to see they were in some training ground he had never seen before and near a lake when he saw the Uchiha walk to the lake and followed on curiously. He watched him stop at the shore and looked at the smirking Uchiha who ruffled his hair gently, making him groan. "All right, now activate your Sharingan and watch me closely, all right?" he asked, making Naruto's head bob up and down, making the raven turn to the lake and ready himself for the jutsu. Snake Ram Monkey Boar Horse Tiger. "Fire style, Grand Fireball Jutsu," he exclaimed while his hands blurred through the jutsu that had become almost second nature to him and ringed his thumb and index finger in front of his mouth. He took in a deep breath and needed chakra in his lungs to convert it into fire and breathed it out through his mouth in a narrow stream of flame. Naruto watched in slow motion, his Sharingan following the narrow stream, when much to his astonishment the narrow stream expanded into a full-blown fireball and the lake let out a hiss of steam. "Sugoi," he exclaimed in a starstruck voice, making Shisui chuckle. He knew it was only a C-rank offensive technique, but for an 8-year-old, the prospect of firing a fireball out of his mouth was just something from heavens. "So you memorized the hand seals and chakra molding, right?" asked the Uchiha, making Naruto's eyes snap back at him and nod with a foxy grin. "Hi, just you see, I'll have it done in no time," he chirped happily, making Shisui crouch down to his eye level and put a hand over his shoulder. He looked at the blonde fondly, now understanding what it meant to pass down a legacy down to a little brother. Naruto, this jutsu is really special, you know that? Asked the boy, making Naruto's eyes blink innocently and shake his head honestly. Shisui smiled at the honest boy and squeezed his shoulder to emphasize his words. Naruto, this jutsu is one which all Uchiha clan members learn. It is a rite of passage. When one truly masters this jutsu is the day our clan considers him to be a true shinobi ready for the world since the era of the warring states and don the symbol of our clan proudly. Now you may not be an Uchiha completely, but you do have the Sharingan, and I can tell the Uchiha blood flows strongly in you. I won't even check your affinity for this one, Naruto, for it is a technique I want you to learn regardless. I want you to complete the ritual that each Sharingan holder before you has completed, he said warmly, making Naruto look at him seriously and nod at his words, seeing how important the technique truly was. Shisui saw the fire in his eyes when his gaze turned to the lake and he saw the blonde walk past him, making him smile. Now he knew what it felt to pass down a legacy to a close person, and he had to say he knew why people said being a teacher was something special. He saw the back of the boy and how his hair flowed in the wind, a vision of the past. The Yondame's silhouette hovering over him was what he envisioned, or a moment as he couldn't help but see the way the two blondes held themselves was eerily familiar. He had looked up to the Yondame as his idol, and it was his way of catching up to him that he had reinvented the Shunshin to his needs in remembrance of his idol. You are destined to be a great man, Naruto. Tobirama-sama saw it, and now I see it too, he mused when he saw the blonde blur past hand seals to make his first attempt at the jutsu. End of flashback. Naruto kept his gaze on the grave of his brother when he felt a hand on his shoulder and looked back to catch the gaze of his mother looking at him with a soft smile, with his lone visible eye visible to her. She didn't know how fond he had grown of Shisui, but the look in his eyes told her how much he was grieving in his loss. Naruto, let's go home, baby. It's going to rain soon, she said softly, making his eyes turn back to the grave and stare at it longingly. You go, Ka-chan, I want to stay here a little longer, he said in his soft broken voice, making her heart clench. She watched as the two redheads in their matching black elegant Uzumaki clan kimonos came by her side while she gazed at Naruto, who was in a simple black shirt and pants. He had never really liked the formality of kimonos, and she got down to her knees behind him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders while pulling him back into her chest from his back. She wrapped him up in her arms and put her chin on his head while giving it a soft kiss and nuzzled her cheek in his silky locks. Naruto-chan, let's go. Shisui wouldn't want you to stay in the grievance of his loss for too long, would he? She asked softly when she felt his little form tremble in her arms and the sounds of choked sobs reached her ears. Why did he have to die, Ka-chan? It's not fair. He sobbed, making her tighten her hold on him and turned him around to cup those puffy whiskered cheeks. She kissed his tears away and looked at him with a soft smile. He needed to let go and come out of grievance, or it wouldn't bode well for a mind as young and troubled as his. Naruto-chan, everyone has to go one day. You need to let go and make sure you live the way he would have wanted you to, so that he may be proud when he watches you from above in Kami's realm, right? She asked softly as she brought his head in her chest and cradled her son while brushing his hair gently. His sobs racked her body and she tried to take away all his pain into her chest while he cried his heart out in her arms. I want him back, Ka-chan, I want him back. He sobbed heavily, making her kiss his head and rub his back soothingly. Shh, it's all right, she whispered when she felt him go limp in her arms after 15 minutes of crying, when the emotional drain of the day caught up with his mind and he fell asleep. She picked him up and smiled sadly when she saw Tobirama and Tsunade walk up to her, both donning black Senju robes too. He isn't taking it well, is he? Asked Tobirama with a hint of concern in his ever-stoic voice, making her shake her head sadly. She brushed his hair while his head rested on her shoulder, his soft breaths on her neck making her feel him get in his deep slumber. He just needs some time, Aji-san, he'll be all right, she said softly, more to assure herself, while he just nodded grimly. Tsunade saw the twins looking really tired too, along with Kushina, who had tear marks for her friend Mikoto's loss. Kushina, let's go home now, we all need the rest. Might as well stay at your house, all right, she asked, making Kushina nod. The more people the better, and a change of atmosphere might to her blonde goofball some good. All right, Aji-san, you come too please, she said softly so as to not wake the child in her arms, and the Senju had nodded sadly, not saying anything as they made their way out of the memorial grounds. Tobirama saw Hiruzen glancing at them, though averted his eyes in shame as soon as he met his own, making him look straight ahead. It's too late for regrets now, what's done has been done. All we can do is make sure the loss doesn't pile up anymore, he thought, glancing at the sleeping blonde worriedly. Mito and Menma just stayed silent at the whole affair since they saw how much their brother was hit with the loss of a close friend. They knew he hardly ever made friends, and to lose a close one must have hurt him a lot. Uzumaki Namike's households. The 5 people walked into the house keeping their footwear in the racks while Kushina passed on it, not willing to put Naruto down and accidentally wake him up. He had already not slept for even an hour last night when the whole village was up in turmoil at the news of the massacre. She walked up the stairs and into his room, placing him in his bed gently and tucked the blankets in. She smiled when he snuggled in the newfound warmth and was about to walk out when she heard a small mumble. Shursue. She heard the soft sniffle from the sleeping boy's sleep, making her heart clench. She pulled his blanket sideways and got in to embrace him and brush his hair softly while he cuddled up in her arms quickly. She could never get over how cute he looked when he purred softly in his sleep, especially when he hugged her and softly sang a soft little lullaby to lull him into sleep like she always did when he had nightmares in his earlier years and couldn't sleep. The 4 watched through the slightly open door and left the mother and son to their own terms. I'll show you 2 to the guest rooms, Mito said politely, making the 2 Senjus nod and follow her while Menma walked back into his room. On the way he glanced back into his brother's room with a blank look for a few moments before stepping in his own and going to sleep. That night the skies wept in remembrance of the great loss of life that the village had suffered, and it rained heavily. The heavens themselves wept and the whole village slept in the dark in a much too glum and silent night while they all grieved for the huge loss in their homes. Next morning, Naruto woke up with a small yawn and his eyes traveled to the clock by his bedside. He saw it was already really close to noon and was surprised that he had missed his early morning training, but after a moment knew he couldn't care less for training today. He got up and out of his room in his nightwear, which he knew his mother must have changed him into while he was asleep. He really must have been out of it, he mused, and stepped in the kitchen to take out a bottle of milk from the fridge. His ears picked up on sounds from the garden. He walked to the glass door and saw Tobirama and Tsunade sitting there with his mother while his siblings were in the middle of training with Pervy Sage. He saw down by Tobirama's side, who said nothing, and both sat in silence when an arm wrapped around Naruto's shoulder and pulled him in a hug. "How are you feeling, Naruchan?" asked the soft and concerned voice of his mother, making him smile softly and snuggle in her arms. He said nothing and enjoyed the calmness that covered him each time she hugged him. His arms wrapped around his mother tightly like a lifeline, who held him and hugged him back happily. Tobirama and Tsunade couldn't help but smile at the cute mother-son and knew how much the 2 loved each other. Meanwhile, Menma saw his brother in his mother's arms in a warm hug and clenched his fist when he turned his glance at Jiraiya, who had just dispatched Mito with a punch to her stomach and had ordered her to cool off. "All right, kiddo, come on, let's see what you got," came the happy voice of the Toad Sage, and Menma shot off in his Uzumaki swirling fist taijutsu stance and engaged him. He vented out everything he felt when he traded blows with the Sannin, who didn't even look like he was trying. His ears picked up on a small conversation between Tsunade and Tobirama. "Naruto is much better at taijutsu, Aji-san," she whispered out of Kushina and Naruto's earshot, and a growl died down in his throat when he saw Tobirama just nod. "Hey Menma, keep your focus on the spar now, will you?" came the shout of Jiraiya, and he felt a fist connect to his cheek and flew backward from the force. Jiraiya sighed when he saw how little progress they were making and rubbed his forehead tiredly. He remembered how quickly Minato used to pick things up, and he just wished that Menma would have picked up at least some of his. His thoughts trailed off when he felt a sudden spike in chakra. He focused his eyes on Menma, whose eyes were now yellow and slitted instead of the usual violet orbs, and he was releasing a crazy amount of chakra. That's the Kyuubi's chakra. He has finally tapped into it. Amazing, such power and purity, he thought as he gazed at the boy who was standing up and grinned. This was what he had been pushing him for all the time, and now finally it had happened. All the people on the sidelines turned their gazes to the sudden spike in chakra. "What is that chakra, Aji-san?" asked Tsunade while he kept his eyes narrowed at the redhead, who was almost glowing with a bright yellow sheen from the chakra he was emitting. "That is the Kyuubi's chakra," he stated stoically, making Tsunade fall silent. "But it doesn't feel anything like what I felt 8 years ago," she whispered, but his sharp ears caught it, and Tobirama nodded. "That's because it is completely pure and untainted by the malice and hatred of the Kyuubi. Minato ripped its soul and gave his twin children pure chakra at their disposal," he surmised, and couldn't help but be impressed as he now understood why Minato had done what he had. Tsunade glanced at the blonde sitting on Kushina's lap, looking at his brother with a smile. He has taken all the hatred and malice of the beast and sealed it up in himself. That is why his brother can tap into a pure source of chakra so easily, she mused and turned her eyes back to the redhead boy standing in the middle of the clearing. Menma stood up and couldn't help but feel awe at the power that was coursing through his veins. So this was the special chakra that his mother and godfather had been trying to unlock, he mused, gazing at his slightly glowing hand with a translucent shining cloak. Amazing, such power, he thought, clenching his fist, and smirked as he felt the raw power within him. Kushina knew what that chakra was and was keeping a narrow eye if there was any chance of him losing control, though the chances were really slim seeing as it had none of the hatred or malice exuding from the boy. She tightened her hug on Naruto and pulled him closer while biting her lip nervously. All the hatred and malice is within him, she thought guiltily as she placed a soft kiss on the back of his head, but Naruto was too intrigued in seeing his brother release such humongous amounts of chakra. He couldn't help but smile as he saw his brother finally unlock the special chakra that his mother had told him about. Now he too saw how powerful it felt, but he felt a strange pull from it and suddenly his stomach started burning a bit. He clenched his hand on his stomach as the pain was increasing. It felt like his insides were being ripped apart and heard a low and demonic whisper in his head. "My chakra, release me so I can get it back." He heard and clutched his head with his hands to make the rumbling go. Kushina saw her son squirming around in her arms and worry cut through her heart when she saw him clutching his head tightly and wincing in pain. "Naruto-chan," she asked worriedly, turning him around when Naruto felt a pulse go off in his stomach and his eyes widened as a flash of pain rocked his body. "It hurts," he screamed, clutching his stomach and curling up in a ball to keep the pain inside from growing, but his efforts were futile. "Naruto-chan, what's wrong?" shouted Kushina worriedly when she saw him clutching his head and stomach tightly. Tobirama immediately rushed to the two and crouched down to see the boy squirming in pain. "Ka-chan, make it go away, it hurts," he whispered with a tear, making her heart drop when she realized what was happening as he let out another blood-curdling scream. "It hurts so much," he screamed in agony, making her tear up herself, and her mind went blank when she saw her baby boy in such pain. Tobirama instantly took charge and ripped the buttons of his nightshirt open to see the seal on the boy's stomach appear over his skin and glow a bright red. The Kyuubi has sensed his chakra and is trying to weaken the seal by pushing what little demonic chakra was left to him, he surmised quickly, and instantly his hands went through 18 strange hand seals and his fingers started glowing with kanji appearing over them for seal and a blue fire covering them. He slammed his fingers on the boy's stomach and twisted them clockwise, making Naruto's eyes roll back in his head, and fell unconscious from the sudden influx of chakra and huge amounts of pain. Kushina saw her son fall unconscious and brought him up in her arms and hugged him tightly. Her body trembled in fright at how she had locked up when her son needed her, while she should have placed the tightening seal over him instead of Tobirama. She sobbed hysterically while Jiraiya and the twins rushed to the fore there. Tsunade tried to calm the crying mother down, but to no avail as she saw her crying her heart out while laying kisses all over his head. "What happened, Tobirama-sama?" asked Jiraiya in a serious tone, making the Senju glance at Menma for a moment and to the spot where he had unlocked his chakra, and narrowed his eyes when he saw the plants there grown up quite a bit that what should be normal before he turned to the white-haired Sannin. "Tsunade, take the twins inside," he stated in a commanding voice, getting a nod from the blonde Sannin, who took the two away while Mito tried to stay for her Aniki but relented after a few moments and went in. Tobirama saw that they were out of earshot and turned his eyes to Jiraiya, who was still waiting for a response, and nodded. When Menma tapped into his special chakra, the Kyuubi felt it and tried to loosen up the seal by pushing in his demonic chakra into the boy's seal. That was what made Naruto writhe in agony, he stated, getting a nod from the white-haired Sannin. He turned his eyes to Kushina and his eyes softened when he put his hand on her shoulder and gave it a squeeze, making her teary eyes turn to him. "He's all right, Kushina, I have tightened the seal. He'll wake up in a few hours." He trailed off when he saw her bury her face in his neck and cry. "He was screaming for my help, Aji-san, and I locked up when he needed me the most." She sobbed, making him smile sadly. He rubbed her head softly to calm her down. "It's alright, Kushina, you just went into a little shock at seeing him in such pain. You are a mother and you love him too much. It is only natural it happened," he spoke warmly, making her sobs lighten a bit at hearing the truths behind his words, and nod. But she still should have suppressed the demonic chakra. It was so dark and foul, just like she remembered, even if it was in such a small amount that only she had felt it. She tightened her arms around her boy and got up, picking him up in her arms and went in towards the couch. She laid his head down on her lap and let him sleep. She saw a blanket cover up her son to see her daughter tucking her brother in and smiled, motioning her to come to her. She kissed her forehead softly while Mito looked at her tear-stained cheeks and the sleeping form of her Aniki worriedly. "Ka-chan, what happened to Naru?" she asked worriedly, making her smile. "Nothing for you to worry about, Mito. He'll wake up in a few hours, don't worry." "He's fine," she said softly, making her nod nervously. "Kushina." She heard and saw Tobirama sit beside her on an armchair. "We must tell him about his burden now." "It is time," he stated, making her bite her lip and look down at his cute face. She rubbed his whiskers and felt him purr softly and smiled. "All right," she whispered softly, making Tobirama nod. He would have to make his mental condition even stronger if he was to resist the demonic influences, he mused when he remembered how he was clutching his head, no wonder trying to make the beast fall silent. "Is the seal fine, Tobirama-sama?" asked Jiraiya, breaking him out of his thoughts, and he nodded. "Yes, the seal is perfectly fine. I have tightened it more so he shouldn't be having any further problems." Minato made sure the seal he placed was strong enough so the beast had the least amount of chances to influence his boy, he surmised, making the Sannin nod. But still one question bugged him, since he too had felt the slight demonic chakra come from the boy. "How much demonic chakra is sealed within the boy?" he asked, making Tobirama fall silent and run the calculations in his head. He had studied the seals of the three children over the years and knew how much each of them held. The twins hold 4 taels worth of yin and yang chakra without any of its influence each, respectively, with Menma having the yang part. He trailed off when his face dawned realization and his eyes snapped back to the overgrown patch in the garden from earlier. "Tobirama-sama?" asked Jiraiya, making his eyes turn back to him and shake off his thought and kept it in his mind for later. "Yes, as I was saying, Naruto has all of the negative emotions compressed along with 1 tael's worth of chakra from the beast within him, giving his siblings free rein over their chakra reserves without the fear of any chances of losing control," he surmised, making the Toad Sage nod with a smile. This was good. No wonder the twins were children of prophecy, he mused happily at the raw potential Menma now held with his secondary chakra source awakened. Tobirama's gaze turned back to the patch of overgrown grass and narrowed in on it in deep thought. That boy's chakra reserves are filled full of yang chakra from his Uzumaki heritage as well as the Kyuubi's pure yang chakra. Is it possible that he has awakened the... His thoughts trailed off as his gaze was on the sleeping blonde whose mother was brushing his hair softly with a fond smile, making him smile himself. Though this new matter would need a little looking into, he mused.